They pushed me out of the company I founded with a security guard who smelled like cheap room spray and failure. But this story doesn't start there. It starts 8 years earlier, in a cramped basement apartment where I accidentally created a data platform that helped 3 major banks avoid a credit crisis. Back then, I had nothing but a glitchy laptop, an old whiteboard, and the idea that user emotions could be encoded into logic. I built a machine, and then they took it from me. But what they didn't know, I had set a trap from the very beginning. My name is Harper Green. I'm 34. And until recently, I was the chief product officer at Vertex Insight, a company I built from nothing but mathematics and intuition. Most people look at data and see numbers. I see patterns, emotional fingerprints left behind by every click, scroll, and pause. Those patterns saved my best friend's bank from collapse when false rumors nearly triggered a run on deposits. That's when I knew I had something valuable. I never planned to be an entrepreneur. With my perpetually ink-stained hands and tendency to forget meals when coding, I was more comfortable behind screens than in boardrooms. My apartment in Austin was more laboratory than living space, whiteboards covering every wall, sticky notes creating a yellow tapestry of ideas, and enough empty coffee cups to open a ceramic exhibition. The algorithm started as a side project. After watching Mira, my friend since college, nearly lose her position at First Capital when false rumors about insolvency spread online, I wondered if there was a way to detect and quantify emotional contagion in digital spaces. Banks had sophisticated systems for tracking financial indicators, but nothing that could predict when human panic might override rational behavior. For 6 months, I barely slept. I built models that analyzed language patterns, tracked reaction velocities across platforms, and measured the emotional temperature of conversations. By the time I was done, I had created something that could not only detect potential crises, but predict them hours or even days before they reached critical mass. When Granite Insurance faced a similar situation, Mira connected me with their CTOs. Within 48 hours, my system had identified the epicenters of misinformation and allowed them to deploy targeted responses that prevented a full-blown reputation crisis. Instead of hemorrhaging customers, they emerged looking prescient and stable. That's when the calls started coming in. Venture capitalists, tech executives, even government agencies, all suddenly interested in what I'd built in my little underground apartment with its perpetually malfunctioning air conditioning. Among them was Nathan Kroll, CEO of a mid-sized analytics company called Vertex Insight. "What you've created is remarkable," he said during our first meeting, his smile as perfect as his tailored suit. "But you need infrastructure to scale it, marketing, sales teams, enterprise-grade hosting, things we already have in place." In retrospect, I should have seen the warning signs. The way his eyes glazed over when I explained the technical architecture, how he kept steering the conversation away from the algorithm and toward market positioning and brand narrative. But I was naive, drunk on the possibility of seeing my creation reach its full potential. The deal seemed perfect. Vertex would acquire my company, then just me and 2 part-time developers, but I would remain as chief product officer with significant equity. Most importantly, I insisted on Clause 12B, a provision that would allow me to repurchase my intellectual property at the original sale price if I was terminated without cause. "It's just a formality," I assured Nathan when his lawyer frowned at the clause. "I'm planning to be here for the long haul." He laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. "Of course you are. We're building something special together." I signed away my company for $1, believing I was gaining partners who shared my vision. The first 6 months were promising. My team expanded to 12 engineers. We migrated the algorithm to Vertex's servers, integrated it with their existing analytics suite, and started onboarding beta customers. I had my own office with a view of downtown Austin and a budget that didn't require me to eat ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. Nathan introduced me to Rachel Langford, the chief marketing officer, a woman whose wardrobe probably cost more than my entire life savings. She had an MBA from Wharton and spoke in the peculiar dialect of corporate marketing, full of brand DNA, emotional touchpoints, and narrative scaffolding. "The product is solid," she told me during our first one-on-one, her red-soled shoes propped casually on the conference table. But it needs a story, an identity that resonates with C-suite decision-makers. I nodded along, believing this was just the next phase of growth. My algorithm, now branded as Emotion Pulse, was solving real problems for clients. What did it matter if Rachel wanted to wrap it in slick marketing language? The warning signs accumulated slowly, like dust on a neglected sensor. First came the brand alignment meetings that began crowding my calendar, pushing out time for actual product development. Then Nathan started questioning the necessity of certain engineering hires. "Do we really need another back-end developer?" he asked, frowning at the requisition form. "The interface is what sells. Let's focus on making it prettier, more intuitive." "The back-end is what makes it work," I countered. "Without robust data processing, the interface is just a pretty face with nothing behind it." He signed the form, but the developer's offer was mysteriously rescinded a week later. The real trouble began when Rachel unveiled her Product Refresh initiative. She presented it to the board with a slideshow so animation-heavy it crashed twice during the presentation. Emotion Pulse would be rebranded with a dashboard full of pulsing emojis, color gradients that shifted based on sentiment scores, and a cartoon mascot, a heart with arms and legs named Pulsey, that would guide users through their emotional data journey. I sat in stunned silence as board members nodded approvingly. This wasn't enhancement, it was infantilization. The clean, information-dense interface my team had designed, optimized for rapid decision-making during potential crises, would be buried under cutesy animations and meaningless visualizations. "I think we're losing sight of the core value proposition," I said finally. "Our clients are financial institutions and insurance companies dealing with mission-critical risk assessment. They don't need a cartoon heart bouncing around their screen." Rachel's smile remained fixed. "Actually, our market research shows that executives respond positively to simplified visual metaphors. Not everyone is a data scientist. Harper?" "No, but they're not kindergartners either," I shot back, immediately regretting my tone when I saw Nathan's expression harden. He cleared his throat. "Rachel's team has put considerable thought into this direction. Let's give it a chance to prove itself in the market." That night, I stayed late, reviewing the market research Rachel had cited. It consisted of interviews with exactly 8 executives, none of whom worked in our target industries. The questions were leading, the methodology flawed, and the conclusions stretched beyond any reasonable interpretation of the data. It wasn't research. It was justification for a decision already made. When I raised these concerns the next day, Nathan brushed them aside. "The board is excited about the new direction. Sometimes we need to trust the process, even when it takes us outside our comfort zones." My comfort zone wasn't the issue. The integrity of the product was. But I was learning the hard way that at Vertex, perception trumped performance, and financial projections held more weight than actual results. The next few months brought a slow, methodical dismantling of everything I'd built. My engineering team was gradually reassigned to other projects or let go during strategic realignments. The core algorithm, the mathematical heart of Emotion Pulse, was simplified to accommodate the new interface, losing much of its predictive power in the process. "Users don't understand complex models," Rachel explained when I objected. "They want simple answers. Good, bad, or neutral. All those nuanced probability distributions just confuse them." I watched in horror as my creation was lobotomized, transformed from a sophisticated predictive system into what amounted to a fancy mood ring for corporate data. When I presented evidence that the simplified version had failed to detect test cases that the original algorithm had caught, Nathan suggested we adjust our success metrics. "Instead of focusing on edge cases, let's emphasize user satisfaction and engagement," he said. "The clients love the new interface. Pulsey's got amazing feedback. They love the cartoon heart, but the system isn't doing what we promised it would do." I argued. When the next crisis hits and Emotion Pulse misses it, user satisfaction won't matter. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Perhaps you're too close to this," Harper, you built the original version, so naturally you're attached to it. But products evolve, markets change, we need to adapt. The final straw came when Nathan ordered the removal of my old whiteboard, the one from my basement apartment, still covered with the original equations and flowcharts that had inspired Emotion Pulse. I'd kept it in my office as both a reminder of where we'd started and a reference for the system's core architecture. It's time for an office refresh, he announced, standing in my doorway with two facilities workers. That old thing is an eyesore. We're getting you a new digital smartboard, much more befitting a CPO's. That whiteboard is part of our history, I protested. It's the original blueprint for the entire system. Exactly. It's history. His smile didn't reach his eyes. We're focused on the future now. Besides, you've digitized all those notes, right? I had, but that wasn't the point. The whiteboard represented something beyond the equations. It was the physical embodiment of the insight that had started everything, watching the workers carry it away. I felt something break inside me, not just disappointment or frustration, but a cold, clarifying anger. That evening, Luis Vega, one of the original engineers still left on the team, asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. At a quiet bar a few blocks from the office, he confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect. They're planning another reorganization, he said, voice low despite the ambient noise. Nathan and Rachel have been meeting with HR. Your name came up. They're firing me. It wasn't a question. Luis nodded, staring down at his beer. End of the quarter. They're calling it a strategic realignment of product leadership. Rachel's taking over product, combining it with marketing into a new experience division or some bullshit. I should have felt shocked, betrayed, something. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. The long, slow torture was finally coming to an end. Thanks for telling me, Luis. What will you do? I took a sip of my whiskey, feeling the burn all the way down. I'm going to remind them to read the fine print. That night, I dug out my copy of the acquisition agreement. Clause 12B was still there, exactly as I'd insisted upon during negotiations. In the event of termination without cause of the founder from her position as Chief Product Officer, founder shall have the right to repurchase all intellectual property, Sarah's code, algorithms, and associated assets originally acquired from founder's company at the original purchase price. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Mira, who had left banking to start her own financial technology consultancy. The second was to my lawyer. Is the clause enforceable? I asked him after explaining the situation. Absolutely, he confirmed. Actually, there's another factor working in your favor. According to my contacts, Vertex never fully completed the legal merger of your original LLC into their corporate structure. It's still technically a separate entity they own, which means the IP transfer is even clearer to unwind. They're that sloppy with legal details? They grew too fast. A lot of things slipped through the cracks during their acquisition spree. This happens more often than you'd think. I wrote a check for $1, had it notarized, and gave it to my lawyer with instructions. Then I waited, attending meetings with a new, serene detachment that clearly unnerved Rachel. I noticed her watching me suspiciously when I stopped arguing against her latest enhancements to the system. No objections, she asked after presenting a plan to remove the last of the advanced analytics features in favor of more user-friendly visualizations. I shrugged. You've made it clear that my input isn't valued. Why waste everyone's time? Nathan's email arrived exactly as Luis had predicted, toward the end of the quarter. Strategic Transition Review, 30 Minis appeared in my calendar, scheduled in the HR conference room for Friday afternoon, the classic firing slot. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a crisp black suit I'd bought but never worn. In my bag, I placed a single folder containing documents my lawyer had prepared. Then I walked into the office, smiling pleasantly at colleagues who avoided my eyes, already aware of what was coming. Nathan and Clarissa from HR were waiting when I arrived. No Rachel. Interesting. Perhaps even she had limits to her appetite for corporate blood sport. Harper, Thanks for coming in, Nathan began, as though I had a choice. This isn't easy, but we need to discuss your role at Vertex moving forward. I nodded, face neutral. The company is evolving, he continued, falling into the rehearsed speech. We're realigning our organizational structure to better reflect our market position and growth strategy. As part of this transition, we're consolidating product and marketing under a unified experience team. And I'm not part of that team, I finished for him. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Your technical contributions have been valuable, but we need leadership that's fully aligned with our vision for the future. We think your skills might be better utilized elsewhere. Clarissa slid a document across the table. We've prepared a generous separation package, 6 months' salary, accelerated vesting on your options, and extended health benefits. I didn't touch the papers. What's the official reason for termination? Nathan shifted in his seat. This isn't a termination for cause. It's a structural reorganization. So I'm being terminated without cause, just to be clear. If you want to use that language, yes, but we prefer. I'm sure you do. I finally reached for my bag, removing my folder. Before we go further, I'd like to remind you of Clause 12B in the original acquisition agreement. Nathan frowned. Clause 12B? It gives me the right to repurchase my intellectual property, everything related to what's now called Emotion Pulse, for the original sale price if I'm terminated without cause. I slid a copy of the agreement across the table. My lawyer has already filed the necessary paperwork. The repurchase price of $1 has been paid. The color drained from Nathan's face. You can't. He turned to Clarissa. Get legal in here now. While they waited for the corporate counsel to arrive, I sat quietly, watching Nathan's composure crumble as he frantically skimmed the agreement. When the lawyer finally entered, Nathan thrust the document at him. Is this enforceable? He demanded. The lawyer read it carefully, his expression growing increasingly grave. It appears to be, yes. And since her original company still exists as a separate legal entity under our ownership, he trailed off, clearly reluctant to finish the thought in front of me. What does that mean? Nathan pressed. It means the intellectual property transfer would be clear-cut. No ambiguity about what assets were originally hers versus what we developed subsequently. The lawyer looked at me with newfound respect. Quite well crafted, actually. Nathan's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. This is blackmail. No, I corrected him calmly. This is a contract, one you signed. I'm simply exercising my rights under its terms. We'll fight this, he threatened. We have resources you can't match. You certainly could try. I stood, gathering my things. But while your lawyers are billing you thousands of dollars per hour to find a loophole that doesn't exist, I'll be talking to your customers, explaining how the product they bought has been systematically stripped of its core functionality to make room for a cartoon mascot, showing them the test results, demonstrating how the current version fails to detect the very threats it was designed to identify. I smiled. I wonder how the board will feel about that. Nathan stood as well, looming over the table. Get out. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. I nodded. I expected nothing less. My lawyer will be in touch to coordinate the IP transfer. Oh, and Nathan, you might want to check Emotion Pulse's own dashboard. The market sentiment around Vertex has been trending negative for months. Pity no one was paying attention to the actual data. As promised, a security guard materialized to escort me to my office. He had the decency to look embarrassed as he watched me pack my few remaining personal items into a box. On my now empty desk, I left my company ID card and a sticky note with a simple message. Clause 12B. Outside, the Texas sun was blinding after the dim coolness of the office. I stood on the sidewalk, box in hand, feeling strangely weightless. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Papers served, the clock starts now. That night, Mira came over with a bottle of champagne. To new beginnings, she toasted, filling 2 glasses in my kitchen. They don't know what hit them yet, I said, clinking my glass against hers. But they will. Within a week, the legal battle lines were drawn. Vertex's lawyers threw every argument they could think of at my claim, but the contract was ironclad. Meanwhile, I hadn't been idle. Through Luis and other former colleagues, word spread about what had happened. Several key engineers who had left during the realignments reached out, expressing interest in joining whatever I did next. More importantly, I connected with 3 of Vertex's largest clients, companies where I still had relationships with the technical teams. When they learned that the original architect of Emotion Pulse was starting fresh, with plans to rebuild the system as it was meant to be, they were intrigued. When I showed them performance comparisons between the original algorithm and the gutted version they were currently paying for, they were alarmed. "We thought the false positive rate was unusually high," admitted the risk manager at Meridian Insurance. Rachel assured us it was normal variance. 2 weeks after my termination, Vertex's lawyer contacted mine with a settlement offer. They would pay me $10 million to relinquish my claim on the IP. "They're scared," my lawyer observed. "This validates our position." I declined the offer without hesitation. I didn't do this for money. By the end of the month, Vertex's stock had dropped 15% as rumors circulated about product issues and potential client defections. Nathan issued a press release dismissing the concerns as market overreaction to routine personnel changes. But the damage was done. Investors were asking questions that neither he nor Rachel could convincingly answer. Then came the ruling from the arbitration panel. As stipulated in the original contract, Clause 12B was valid and enforceable. I had the right to reclaim all intellectual property related to my original algorithm for the sum of $1, which had already been paid. Nathan made one last desperate attempt, offering me a position back at Vertex with full creative control and a seat on the board. I declined via email, with a screenshot of Pulsey the cartoon heart attached. The day I registered my new company, Phoenix Analytics, the business press had a field day. Founder reclaims AI algorithm for $1 after corporate ouster. Read one headline: Tech David defeats Goliath, using forgotten contract clause. Proclaimed another: I leased office space in the same business park as Vertex, just 2 buildings away. From my new corner office, I could actually see into Nathan's. I made sure our sign was visible from the street they shared. Luis was my first hire, followed quickly by the core engineers who had built the original system with me. We even brought on Vertex's former CFO, who had left after clashing with Nathan over financial projections. The numbers never supported their strategy, she told me during our interview. They were selling promises they couldn't keep. When I pointed that out, Nathan said I lacked vision. Within 3 months, we had rebuilt the algorithm, improving it based on everything we'd learned. We called it Truth Pulse, an intentional echo of the name Vertex had chosen. But with an emphasis on accuracy over appearance, our interface was clean, data-dense, and unapologetically technical, with optional layers of simplification for less analytical users. No cartoon mascots in sight. Meridian Insurance signed with us the day our product launched. 2 other former Vertex clients followed within the week. The exodus had begun. I didn't actively poach Vertex's employees, but I didn't turn them away when they came looking for jobs. Many had watched in dismay as the company drifted from its analytical roots toward what one engineer described as a PowerPoint presentation masquerading as a tech company. 6 months after my firing, Phoenix Analytics had 40 employees, a profitable balance sheet, and a growing reputation for integrity and technical excellence. Vertex, meanwhile, was in free fall. Their stock had lost over 40% of its value. 2 board members had resigned. And Nathan, according to sources still inside the company, was frantically trying to pivot the business toward new markets where his reputation hadn't preceded him. I didn't feel the satisfaction I had expected. There was a hollowness to watching something I had helped build, even if it had been corrupted beyond recognition, struggle, and fail. The engineers and analysts at Vertex weren't responsible for Nathan and Rachel's decisions, yet they were paying the price alongside them. When a major tech conference in San Francisco invited me to give a keynote address, I hesitated before accepting. Did I want to be known primarily for this corporate revenge story? But the opportunity to reshape the narrative was too valuable to pass up. On stage, looking out at hundreds of industry peers, I decided to tell a different story than the one they expected. Many of you know me as the founder who reclaimed her algorithm for $1. I began. It makes a great headline: David versus Goliath, the plucky underdog who outsmarted the corporate suits. I paused, letting the murmurs die down. But that's not why I'm here today. I pulled the dollar bill from my pocket, the actual check I'd written to repurchase my IP, now framed. This represents something more important than clever contract language or corporate intrigue. It represents the value of staying true to your vision, even when it would be easier to compromise. For the next 40 minutes, I didn't mention Nathan or Rachel or Vertex by name. Instead, I talked about the tension between innovation and commercialization, about the courage required to protect technical integrity in the face of market pressures, about building products that do what they promise, not just what sells easiest. The algorithms we create shape how organizations understand their world. I concluded, we have a responsibility to ensure they reflect reality, not just the reality someone wishes to see. Sometimes that means walking away from money, prestige, comfort, or even companies we've built to protect the truth at the heart of our work. The applause was deafening. As I left the stage, a young engineer stopped me. I work at a startup where the CEO keeps pushing us to make our risk assessment model give more positive outcomes, she said. Your story gave me the courage to push back. Thank you. That moment was worth more than any corporate victory. A week later, news broke that Nathan had resigned as CEO of Vertex. The board appointed a veteran technology executive with a background in analytics to replace him. Rachel followed Nathan out the door shortly afterward, her LinkedIn profile suddenly devoid of any mention of Vertex or Emotion Pulse. Pulsey? The cartoon heart disappeared from the company's website overnight. Louis showed me the internal announcement that went out to Vertex employees. The company is returning to its roots as a data-driven analytics provider. It stated, "We are recommitting to technical excellence and the integrity of our products." Sounds familiar, I observed. He grinned, almost like someone's been reading your keynote transcript. The new CEO reached out a month later, suggesting a meeting. Over coffee at a neutral location, not his office or mine, he made an unexpected proposal. Vertex and Phoenix are competing for the same customers with similar technologies, he said. It's creating market confusion and hurting both companies. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not interested in selling Phoenix. I'm not asking you to. I'm suggesting a different approach. He slid a document across the table. A merger of equals, joint leadership, combined technologies, with your original algorithm at the core. I stared at him, searching for the trap. Why would I agree to that after everything that's happened? Because it's the rational move for both companies. And because I've spent the last month cleaning house at Vertex, the people who wronged you are gone. The culture that enabled them is being dismantled. He leaned forward. I've also talked to your team. They miss working with some of their former colleagues. The combined company would be stronger than either one alone. I took the proposal, but didn't open it. I'll need time to consider this. And extensive due diligence. I'd expect nothing less. He stood to leave, then paused. By the way, we found your whiteboard in storage. The original one, with all the equations. I had it installed in our main conference room. Regardless of what you decide about the merger, it belongs with the algorithm it inspired. The next day, I visited Vertex for the first time since being escorted out. The changes were immediately apparent. The lobby, once dominated by abstract art and brand slogans, now featured data visualizations showing real-time analysis from client systems. Engineers were visible through glass walls, working in collaborative spaces that had previously been executive offices. And there, in the main conference room, was my whiteboard. The equations and diagrams were untouched, preserved exactly as I had left them. Someone had added a small brass plaque at the bottom. Harper Green's original Emotion Pulse algorithm, 2017. I ran my fingers over the faded dry erase marks, feeling a strange sense of completion. The algorithm had come home. Perhaps it was time for me to do the same, but on my terms, with my vision intact. 6 weeks later, after thorough due diligence and extensive negotiations, Phoenix Analytics and Vertex Insight announced their merger. The combined company would be called Pulse Analytics, with the Phoenix from my logo and the green Vertex from theirs merging into a new visual identity. I would serve as Chief Technology Officer, with full authority over product development and technical direction. The Emotion Pulse and Truth Pulse products would be combined into a single, powerful platform that honored the original vision while incorporating the best innovations from both teams. At the all-hands meeting announcing the merger, I stood before the combined staff, many familiar faces, some new ones, and reflected on the journey. Some of you were with me in a basement apartment 8 years ago, when this was just equations on a whiteboard, I said. Others joined along the way, through different companies and iterations of the technology. What matters isn't where we came from, but where we're going together. I gestured to the whiteboard, now installed permanently in our largest meeting space. These equations represent more than an algorithm. They represent a commitment to seeing the world as it is, not as we wish it to be, to finding truth in chaos, to building tools that illuminate rather than obscure. They tried to erase my name with a termination notice. I concluded, but they forgot who wrote the blueprint in the first place. The room erupted in applause, and as I looked out at the faces, some who had stood with me, others who had stayed behind, all now united under a shared vision, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph or vindication, but a profound sense of rightness, of pieces finally falling into where they belonged. The algorithm had found its true home, and so had I.